Live NFL trivia every Wednesday night on Twitch at 9 p.m. Eastern. Come show off your football knowledge for a chance to win cash prizes. Check the link in the description to find out more. And now, on with our feature presentation. Last year, I did a video on the top 5 worst calls in the history of the wildcard round. I followed that up 2 weeks later with the top 5 worst calls in the history of the conference championship round. Both videos were received incredibly well, but I always got one question, and still get it today. Why didn't I do a top 5 worst calls in the history of the divisional round? Well, the answer to that is twofold. Number one, a lot of the worst calls in those two aforementioned rounds still live on in NFL history, and are talked about years later. There aren't as many of those controversial calls in the divisional round, for whatever reason. It was tough making cuts for the wildcard and conference championship video. Heck, the Jerry Rice controversy in the 1998 wildcard against the Packers didn't crack the top 5, and Miles Jack wasn't down didn't even make the top 5. And number two, a lot of the controversial calls from the divisional round are instances of hating the rule, but it was correctly enforced. As an example, the Dez Bryant catch-no-catch controversy, as much as I don't necessarily agree with it, was the correct call. I can't do a video on calls that were correctly made. However, after thinking about it for over a year, I'm ready to tap into the worst of the worst for the divisional round. I'm doing the AFC Divisional round in this video, simply because when I put together the worst calls, all 5 of them happen to be from the AFC. So I might do an NFC video down the line too. And as a heads up, if you're a Steelers fan, I apologize in advance, because you're going to be on this list a lot. With that being said, here are the top 5 worst calls in the history of the AFC Divisional round. When I did the wildcard and conference championship videos, all of the calls impacted the losing team. The controversial pass interference no call at the end of the 2018 NFC Championship, that played a big part in the New Orleans Saints losing. They go to the Super Bowl if that's called correctly. The missed field goal that was inexplicably called good at the end of the 1965 Western Playoff, that played a big part in the Baltimore Colts losing. They go to the NFL Championship if that's called correctly. And while the top 4 calls on this list all had that sort of impact, our number 5 play did not. It had no impact on the game whatsoever, and the team that got screwed over by this call still won. However, I had to put it on here because of just how inexplicably bad this call was. It's the 1979 Divisional, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are hosting the Miami Dolphins. The game starts off incredibly well for Pittsburgh. After the first quarter, they're already up 20-0. By halftime, they're still pitching a shutout, and still playing lights out defensively. Bob Greasy has just 41 yards passing through the first half, and the Dolphins would finish the game with 22 carries for 25 yards, averaging about 1 yard per carry. And after Pittsburgh gets a stop to start the third quarter off, it's looking like the second half is going to be the same as the first. The only way Miami is going to get back in the game is if the referees do something stupid. And right on cue, it's 4th down. George Roberts punts it away, it's muffed, and it's recovered by the Dolphins. A huge break for Miami, and they have first down in the red zone. It's a costly mistake by the Steelers, and it's one of the few that they've had all day. Except, this wasn't a mistake by the Steelers at all, because the ball never touched anyone. At no point during this play did any Steeler even come remotely close to touching the football. Regardless, Miami winds up scoring on the drive thanks to this awful mistake, as Bob Greasy hits Daryl Harris from 7 yards out to take advantage of the absolute gift that they were given with field position. Now again, this had no impact on the game. The Steelers won at 34-14 and will go on to win Super Bowl 14, making this incident a distant memory. But this play might be the only muffed punt in the history of the NFL that wasn't actually muffed at all. The referee just didn't know how punts are supposed to bounce. Fortunately, it didn't wind up costing the Steelers at the end of the day. I can't say the same about the next few calls though. It absolutely pains me to do this, because I love this game so much. For very biased and obvious reasons, this is one of my favorite games of all time. But fair is fair, and as much as I don't want to admit it, I have to do it. The Steelers got absolutely robbed on the biggest play of the entire game. It's the 2017 AFC Divisional, and the Jacksonville Jaguars, after being 3-13 the year before and after winning their first playoff game in a decade, are somehow one of the final 3 teams standing in the AFC. It gets even crazier to see the further out we get from that game and realize how quickly everything fell apart. But Jacksonville looked to be in complete control of this one early on, leading at 21-0 midway through the second quarter. They were pouring it on, and the only reason that the Steelers were even remotely in this game was because Ben Roethlisberger was dropping dimes. Seriously, for the most part, his touchdown passes were not defendable. They were perfect throws. And it seemed like the Jags' luck was finally starting to run out. They hadn't scored on their previous 4 offensive drives. They were only up by 7 at this point early in the fourth quarter, and the Steelers had fantastic field position following Brad Nortman getting his pump blocked and having it travel just 15 yards. The Steelers aren't able to get the first down, but they do have a 4th down needing just 1 yard to go. As a side note, I have to say that the last time they had 4th and 1 in the game, they called one of the stupidest and funniest plays I've ever seen, especially since they did the exact same thing the play before. But I digress. This time, they throw the ball, trying to find the rookie phenom Juju Smith-Schuster. And just like that, it falls incomplete, and the Jaguars, for the first time since the first half, have momentum on their side. However, there's a very good reason that the pass fell incomplete, and that's because the referees missed a blatantly obvious hold. AJ Boye should have been flagged for 5 yards, and the Steelers should have been given an automatic first down. Instead, the Jaguars get it back via turnover on downs, take a 35-21 lead, and end up winning at 45-42. The referees had a bit of a stinker in the second half. They called Jalen Ramsey for unnecessary roughness on this play for a late hit out of bounds, even though he was pushed into the guy. But that play's impact was minimal compared to this 4th down play in the 4th quarter. Feeling bad, Steelers fans? Well, it's about to get worse. How the Pittsburgh Steelers made it into the playoffs in 1989 was remarkable. They started off 0-2 after being outscored 92-10 in their first 2 games, and were 6-7 with 3 to play. They finished the season with a point differential of -61, which was hands down the worst point differential of any team in football in the playoff picture. Yet they won their final 3 games, had a bit of luck go their way, then beat the Houston Oilers in overtime in the wildcard round, and against all odds, were now somehow in the divisional round against the Denver Broncos. But this is where everyone thought that their Cinderella run was going to come to an end. The Broncos were double-digit favorites, and were the only really good team in a really weak AFC. Plus, when the teams met in the regular season, the Broncos won 34-7, and Pittsburgh had just 7 first downs. No way can Pittsburgh do anything in this game, right? Well, to the shock of everyone, they come out swinging. After the first quarter, they led it 3-0. Following a 3-yard touchdown run by Merrill Hodge in the second quarter, they led it 10-0. And after the Broncos finally got on the scoreboard with a 1-yard touchdown run by Mel Braden, Pittsburgh responded after Bubby Brister threw a 9-yard touchdown pass. With 30 seconds left in the first half, the Steelers, in what was looking like the biggest upset in the history of the AFC playoffs if it held, were up 17-7. Going into halftime up by 2 possessions would have been monumental. All the Steelers have to do is not allow the Broncos to get into field goal range, and they've got it. Yes, this catch by Mark Jackson and ability to get out of bounds isn't good, but there's only 8 seconds left. If Denver can't get into field goal range on this play, they'll just have to chuck up a Hail Mary and hope for the best. Well, they do. Elway hits Ricky Nattiel on a 15-yard pass to set up David Treadwell for a 43-yard field goal. Except there's one small problem. Nattiel very blatantly trapped this ball. This was in no way whatsoever a completed pass. For some reason, the broadcast never showed a reverse or a close-up angle, but I can blow it up for you. Here's the ball, and it's very clearly being trapped on the ground. Everyone on Pittsburgh knew right away that this wasn't a catch. And yet, not only did the referees call it a catch, but even though they had instant replay at their disposal, they decided not to utilize it. Why have the system if you're not going to use it? Defensive tackle Tim Johnson ripped into the officials after the game, and rightfully so, saying the guy didn't catch the ball. If anyone has 2 eyes and can see, he knows the guy didn't catch the ball. It seemed to me like the referees were trying to get the half over with and weren't questioning the calls. And sure enough, that call played a huge part in the game. Treadwell made the field goal, and the Broncos won 24-23, with those 3 points making all the difference. But hang on, Steelers fans, because it gets even worse. When NFL players try their hand at acting, it can sometimes be really, really bad. Acting is about the only thing that Patrick Mahomes can't do well. Joe Flacco's attempt at acting was the exact opposite of elite. And Rob Gronkowski...
Oh, but I'm special.
When it comes to your acting, Gronk, you sure are special. You sure are. But there are some people that are surprisingly good and had some incredible careers as actors. After carving up defenses and making it to 4 straight Pro Bowls, running back Eddie George made it onto Broadway. Peyton Manning was absolutely hysterical on Saturday Night Live, with the United Way sketch still being talked about 2 decades later as one of the greatest sketches of all time. And in the 2002 Divisional, Tennessee Titans kicker Joe Nedney won an Oscar for his incredible acting abilities. Here's the situation. We're tied at 31 apiece after an unbelievable first 4 quarters of football. This was the true definition of a back-and-forth affair. The lead changed hands 3 times in the second half alone. After the Titans won the overtime coin toss, Justin McCarron's, a complete no-name that had no catches all day, and just 22 catches in his 2-year career, makes back-to-back big plays, catching a 31-yard pass from Steve McNair, and following that up with a 22-yard catch. The Titans are now in the red zone and facing second down at the 13-yard line. With this being a 30-yard chip shot, Tennessee opts for the field goal to win it now. Considering the fact that Nedney in his career was 52 for 52 from inside 30 yards, this is money in the bag. Except, He misses the kick. Pittsburgh somehow survives and is still in this. But hang on a minute, because the Steelers get called for running into the kicker. And in no way whatsoever was this the correct call. This was as good of an acting job as I've ever seen, and I'm baffled as to how the referees bought the fact that a kicker did a complete 360 before falling to the ground. Bill Cowher, naturally, thought that this was a flop, saying for a game to be decided on that call is ludicrous. You know who else thought it was a flop? That's right, Joe Nedney, who admitted afterwards that he flopped, and said in the years following the game, the official who threw the flag told me, "I have taken so much hell for your flop." He was mad at me. Nedney redeemed himself by making the next kick from 5 yards closer, which sent the Titans to the AFC Championship. And that was the only time in Titans history that a playoff game was decided on a controversial special teams call. With that, it's time to reveal the number one play. And the number one play is one of the most infamous bad calls of all time. Our number one play features the New England Patriots and the Oakland Raiders. It features a play so controversial that all these years later, people still talk about it as one of the worst calls of all time. It's a play so controversial that the head referee was barred from doing games for that team for over a decade. And it's a play so controversial that the team that got screwed definitely wins the game without it. But because of the call, not only did they lose, but the beneficiary team wound up winning their first Super Bowl in franchise history, doing so by beating an NFC team that was in the big game for the second time in the last 3 years. That's right, we're going all the way back to 1976. Look, the tuck rule was a horrible rule, but it was the correct enforcement. Again, hate the rule, but the official did his job correctly. This, on the other hand, this was just the wrong call, period. It's the 1976 Divisional, and the New England Patriots are leading 21-17 on the Oakland Raiders. On 3rd and 18 with less than 1 minute to go, Ken Stabler throws an incomplete pass, which brings up 4th and a mile. Or at least it should have brought up 4th down. Instead, the referees inexplicably call roughing the passer on Ray Hamilton. There was no hit to the helmet rule back then. Hamilton hit the arm of Stabler as he threw it. In no way is this roughing the passer, especially based on the rules from 1976. Hamilton said that he was in disbelief, and rightfully so, when he realized that the flag was on him, saying, "I just figured that someone had held one of our guys. I just knew that's what it was. It couldn't have been anything else." I was totally shocked. It was a phantom bogus call. The Raiders, instead of facing 4th and 18 and likely losing, were given a new set of downs. And when Ken Stabler punched it in from 1 yard out with 10 seconds left, the Raiders came out on top 24-21, breaking the hearts of Patriots fans everywhere thanks to one of the worst calls in the history of the sport. Even last year, when I asked myself if I could do a divisional round video, I knew for a fact that if and when I got around to it, this was going to be the number one call. It couldn't possibly be anything else. Ray Hamilton was a very good player for the Patriots. He played 9 seasons in New England, started 117 games, and recorded 53.5 sacks. Not bad for a 14th round pick. But he will always be remembered as the victim of the worst penalty in the history of the AFC Divisional. Get your official Jaguar Gator 9 merchandise by going to jg9shop.com, and be sure to like this video, ring the notification bell, subscribe down below if you haven't already, as it helps the channel out a lot, and be sure to check out Twitch every Wednesday night at 9 p.m. Eastern for your chance to play NFL Trivia and win cash prizes, link in the description below. If you want to see videos like this condensed down to 60 seconds, then follow me on TikTok at JaguarGator9, and subscribe to 60-Second NFL History on YouTube. To see highlight videos of players throughout the history of the NFL, subscribe to JG9 Highlights. Also, special thanks to all of our Patreon supporters for helping out the channel. Your support is greatly appreciated. See how you can become a patron and request future video topics in the description below.